Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ivick. I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at eLearning Brothers. We have a great presentation packed with Lectora development tips and tricks today. First, I'll go over a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. We'll email a copy of the recording out to everyone who registered, so you can keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow for that. If you have any questions at all during the webinar, feel free to use the questions panel. We'll get to as many as we can during the webinar. If we don't get to yours, we will do our best to follow up offline afterwards. Joining me today, we have Bill Milstead, Senior Developer, Alan Marquez, Developer, and Robin Cox, eLearning Developer and Instructional Designer on our Custom Solutions team. They're going to be showing you a few different cool things that you can do in Lectora to streamline your development. So without further ado, Bill, I'll let you get started.
All right, so welcome to everybody to Lectora Live. Like Stephanie was saying, today we're going to take a look at some practical tips and tricks in Lectora. But before we get started and before I go on my spiel about what we're going to do today, I want to just, I try to do this at the beginning of everything because where we can adjust, we will. I want to just try to get a feel for where everybody's at with Lectora development. And Lectora as a tool. So Stephanie, I think you have a couple polls up. Is that?
Yes,
is that
I
there?
do.
All right.
Started.
Okay. So I just want to get an idea, like I was saying, of in general, what your level of e-learning development expertise is. Are you beginner, you intermediate, advanced? Nice and easy. Let's give you a few seconds here to answer that and see where we're at as a group.
All right, so votes are coming in. It looks like the majority of our attendees are intermediate, but we've got a good mix of beginner and advanced as well. I'll give you all just about one more second to click right there on the screen, let us know your experience level, and then I'll share these results.
Okay. All right, great. That's good. That's good. I think there's definitely something for everybody to learn from here, but makes me happy that we're all kind of in the intermediate group because we got a lot we can build off of there, and yeah, I think you guys will be happy with this. So the next question I have, I just want to get a feel really for your experience with Lectora. How long have you been using it in general? All right, 1 to 3 years, 4 to 7 years, 7 or more, or you haven't tried it yet.
And if you want to expand on that, you can always let us know in the questions panel. So far, we have actually quite a good mix of people with experience in Lectora. I'll give it about one more second before we share these results.
Oh, 42% haven't tried it yet. This is going to be interesting. Okay. And then, so the vast majority of folks either haven't used it or have been using it for under 3 years or 1 to 3 years. So this actually could be pretty interesting. So since we've got a lot of non-Lectora users out there, I'm going to show you some unique stuff in terms of the way Lectora handles development today. And we're going to do this as conversational as possible. All right, so we're going to be in the tool pretty much the whole time after we get done with this. And actually, we're in the tool right now, but we're going to be in the tool the whole time when we're done with this initial setup bit. No presentation, no agenda, just really conversational. Right, we're gonna pick through a couple files, look at some neat things you can do with some built-in features of Lectora Desktop that are often overlooked. All of these actually are applicable to Lectora Online as well. The way we're going to work it, first I'm going to just go on a bit about 1 or 2 of my favorite kind of commonly unlauded features of Lectora, and we're going to bounce it over to Alan. He's going to talk about some progress indicators and some neat things you can do there, as well as some stuff we've got going on in the library for those. Basically the idea is we're going to look at ways to use features that are a little overlooked in some unique ways. After that, we'll come back to me depending on how much time we have, and I've got 5 or 6 other items queued up that start getting kind of progressively more advanced. If we run out of time, we'll schedule another one and we'll follow up there. All right. Throughout that bit, all right, Robin on the line here, she's got a bit of a different perspective. She works in the custom environment versus Alan and I work in the templates environment. She's kind of going to chime in and add in some points along the way. Again, keeping it nice and conversational. And we'd like you to do the same thing, right? So as we're talking, we'd love to hear your input for any of the topics that we're looking at, right? What questions do you have about it? How have you used the features that we're showcasing? How have you used, similar tricks, or how have you gotten different in your approach? Things like that. Just toss them in the panel over there, and we'll stop and address and move forward. Okay. All right. So with that, let's officially get started. All right. So on my screen here, I've got a Lectora course. We're going to be picking through it. This is it right now. The first thing we're going to talk about, and it's going to be the bulk of what I'm covering here in the very beginning bit, is timers. It's a little kind of simple, often overlooked feature in Lectora that's built in, and it can be super powerful. Okay. Now I focus on this one, and I bring this up kind of often because it's something that when I was doing a lot of custom development, I really wish that some other development tools had built-in timers that were easy to work with, and I didn't have to custom make them, which was pretty common, right? We still do that with some of our templates that we use in certain other tools, but in Lectora, it's a built-in feature. And you can do an awful lot with it because, like with everything in Lectora, it's pretty open and pretty flexible. Okay. So we're going to look at exactly that, right? The actual process of adding a timer in Lectora is remarkably simple, right? All you actually do is go over and press insert and then timer, and you get your little timer object added to whatever you've got on your screen. You can move that like any other object, hide it, do whatever you need, and most importantly, you can add actions to it, right? Your timer actions are exactly what you'd expect. It's a big drop down of what you can do when that timer is done playing. You can change the initialization, the trigger for that to be when it shows, when it hides, all the stuff you'd expect from Lectora, and you have a pretty exhaustive list of what you can make it do, which means that Lectoras are, again, super flexible and super useful. So let's look at a couple common practices of it, right? Or common uses rather for timers. One big one that's really common is adding a timer to an assessment. Makes sense. We've got tests all the time that we have to have time bound. That's really easy to do in Lectora, and like I was saying, it can be a little different than you're expecting, a little more flexible than you're expecting. So there's two ways that you can add a timer to an assessment in Lectora. The first one is the simplest and easiest, and it's pretty much what you'd expect. You go to your test, right? You select your test, you go over to your behavior, and you have a little timed test checkbox right there. You press that. It adds a test timer to your page, and then you can go in and adjust that timer however you want, right? So we have contextual properties here that you can select, name it if you want to. You can make it be a countdown or a count up, right? You can add it hours, minutes, seconds. You can turn off some of that display if you want. You can make it auto start. You can format the text, add transitions, do all that kind of fun stuff, right? But what you'll notice when you tie it explicitly to an action, like I was saying, you have to add actions to timers. When you set up a timer on that way, in that way, it automatically comes over with a pre-populated first action for you. And that is going to be to process the test that you just tied it to. Easy peasy, right? Set in your time, click a button, set your time, you're good to go. It handles everything for you. But you can also do that in a more manual way, just like I showed you before, where you add a freeform timer in by hitting insert timer and then manually adding your action. Now, if you wanted it to be to process this test, you would just have to go in and set your action to be to process this test, right? So process test or survey down at the bottom. You got your test 2 in the object there, and you're good to go. Now, why would I do it that way versus the other? Is because now in this method where I'm inserting it as opposed to tying it explicitly to the test, I can reposition that test timer object and bring it outside of the test if I want to, and inherit it differently on other pages, okay? Which you can't do if you tie it explicitly to the test, right? So I'm gonna grab that object, move it up. You see, I can't move that around when it's set up with my checkbox and behavior. But if I've manually inserted that, I can grab that object and I can move that thing all the way up to the title level if I want to, which now means that that page or that object is gonna be inherited across every page in my course. Okay. That does seem a little odd, but why would I need to do something like that? Well, imagine we've got a test where you're actually driving your user to not only answer questions in that test, but also explore something, to consume information to be able to answer those questions. Last month, we did a Lectora Live on a haunted escape room game. This thing right here, if anybody remembers. And that's kind of the type of thing that we've got going on there. User enters into a game, presses some button, reads some content, presses some buttons, accesses some test questions, answers those, and they have a set amount of time that they can do all of those things in, right? So imagine you want your user to navigate in a full course, go out to different pages, consume some content, come back, answer questions, and they got to do all of that inside 5 minutes. Well, that's an easier way to do it. Again, it doesn't have to be explicitly tied to that test, but we're talking about how the timer is often used in terms of a test and then expanding it out a little bit. Okay, so that's still pretty typical stuff though, right? Like, oh, okay, we can process tests and we may want tests to be timed. So what else can we do with timers? Why am I spending some time on this? Well, timers, like I was saying, because you can have them do anything you want, they can be pretty interesting for adding some motion and some pizzazz into a course, right? So like this example that I've got on screen right now, just got a little title says, I've got a little ellipse in the page, but all of a sudden it's moving, right? And you'll notice what it's going to do is it's going to move to each of the 4 corners of my page, and then it's going to keep looping that. That's because its action is tied in part to my timer that I have there. And this kind of thing we do actually quite a lot on our side for creating little emphasis animations or creating some background kind of, just stuff to look at, real pretty factor stuff that you may not necessarily have in an Lectora course otherwise. This is a quick and easy way to make that happen. So I'll show you how I made this animation, right, in simplest form, which could be applied to other things, and I'll show you where we've used this in another example as well. So this is actually super simple to build. The first thing I actually did was just, insert my circle object on page, just insert shape, popped it where I needed. And I knew I wanted to move it from, corner to corner to corner. So I needed to have my positions. Just to get myself organized, I went over and first thing I did was I dragged it to where I wanted it to go on the page, and I grabbed the position and size coordinates, right? So I want to be 22,560. I marked that down in my notes, right? And then I want to move it to 895, 560, and then I'm going to do that process for my other 2, okay? Once I've got my positions where I know where I want to move this thing to, I'm going to set up this little move actions action group, okay? Now for you new users in Lectora, an action group is something that's pretty specific to Lectora. It's almost like templatizing actions in some ways. So if you have actions that need to be repeatedly run the same way every time, you can create a group of actions and then target an object, or you can target that action group from an object. So for instance, I click button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. They all technically are going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to, instead of saying, hey, do action 1, 2, 3, 4 repeated across all those buttons, I'm just going to target an action group. Okay, that's what I've got here on the screen in this move actions group, is a series of actions that I want to step through, and I'm going to reuse them over and over again. First one is to move my ellipse to a set of coordinates. In this case, it's 45,550. The next action is to move my ellipse to 897,550, but you'll notice over on the left here, I've got a delay on that action that I've added. So it's going to wait 3 seconds before it does this action once this action group is run. My next action, you'll notice it has a delay of 6 seconds, right? So a little longer. And then we're moving our ellipse to a different point. And then my last action, I've got a delay of 9 seconds, and then I move my ellipse back to a 4th point. Okay, so that's my basic move, right? Start here, go here, go here, get these 4 points. But to get that to loop, I actually am going to use my timer, right? In order to do that, it only takes me 2 actions. So I put in my timer. One's already started for me. I just grabbed my target, and all I told my initial action to do on my timer here was to go run an action group, and then I chose my action group move actions. Okay, so basically, once my timer's done playing, after that first 10 seconds of pause or 12 seconds, how I've got it set up, go ahead and run the action group. That's why it didn't run initially when I started that slide. If you notice, I was talking and then it started up a little bit after I started talking. And then there's a second action I added to cause my timer to loop. Once it's done playing, play the timer. Real simple. That just creates a situation where after 12 seconds, right, once we're done playing the first time, we're going to start my move actions group and have it run through that cycle. At the same time, we're going to wait until we're going to also going to start back over at the beginning. Once that timer's done, we're just going to repeat that action over and over and over again ad infinitum. Okay, so being able to create those kind of loops real easily with a timer object that can control movement is really super useful for taking your courses up to the next level, right? Gaming, this kind of thing can be particularly useful in creating games to add in, right? So if you've got background elements, like I was saying before, if you have if you have repetitive actions that a character or an object in your game might need to use, being able to tie those to timers and tie those to action groups is actually a particularly useful way to make that happen easily. And it can go a long way. Okay, so I'm gonna ramble a little more about timers here because I do think that they're much more powerful than you might recognize. Another really useful action or useful use for timers is prompting our users. A lot of the times, one of the things that we hear kind of complaints about are well, how do I know that my user got through all of my content? Well, we want to, one way to force that is that, well, there's a bunch of ways, right? But in the interest of not, adding more data to your course or getting into a complicated way, you can always lock down your navigation until they've done everything on the page. Okay, great. Then I've got users that are complaining that they're getting stuck on the page. I haven't provided enough, instruction because I'm either out of space or that's not the point of this interaction. Well, adding a timer into your course to kind of add a preventative measure for possible complaints where users get stuck is a really useful thing to do. In this example, for instance, right here, I'm going to start showing. I've got a timer that runs, and if my user doesn't make an action on this page, if I haven't clicked button 1, 2, or 3, it's going to throw a message that says, hey, go click button 1, 2, or 3. You haven't done something in long enough. Okay, right there. Please make a suggestion. Now that's also going to loop, just like the last one that I showed you, because that's a real easy thing to do and can be used for a lot in this tool. I've got it set up just real simple that it's just going to throw a message that says, hey, please take a selection every 10 seconds. But you could add conditionals to that say, hey, if it's been, one time played through, say, please make a suggestion. If my timer's gone through 2 times, we're going to say, at 20 seconds, really, you need to make a suggestion. At 30 seconds, we're going to say, hey, you should really pay more attention. We've got something to do, right? You could adapt the messaging based on where you're at with that timer to kind of try to, bump those users along a little further, give them a little just-in-time support, right? Now, if I click OK on that again and I let my timer start up, I click button 1, you'll notice it's going to change my title there. And once my timer stops, I'm not going to get this message again. Real simple. Reason for that is because we're using conditionals, like I just said, right? In order to create this, it was very, very simple. I just put a title on the page, added in my ellipse and my timer, have my buttons. Real quick setup. I copied and pasted all those because those just take 2 actions to do anything. First thing I do on that button is I want to track whether or not the user has done something, right? So to do that, all I need to do is modify a variable, a little custom variable that I've created in here called user action. Easy peasy. It's initially set up to be 0, right, or true. I think I set it up to be false, not 0. And if I do something, I'm going to modify that variable to be true, right? Then I'm also going to do something with that button. So in this case, I'm just going to change this title content here to be a pre-selected text. It's going to be uSelected button, right? I'm just going to swap contents there. Now, in order to get that kind of conditional timer to loop, all I actually have to do is make reference to the same variable that I just used on that button in my timer object. So display a message, please make a selection if, and then I set my conditional there to be if the user action is equal to false, right? And again, I could kind of keep compounding different variables and different messages to kind of progressively build on our users in action or you could also apply that as well with kind of changing some movements or changing background animation similar to what we were just showing previously. Okay, last one, and then we're going to go over to Alan, who's got a really, really cool one. We're going to talk about kind of a twofer in this one. We're going to combine two things. So one is that Lectora Desktop 21, we've got some custom button states in there, and that's something that a lot of people just aren't aware of. But we do. It's a great feature. It's pretty much exactly what you'd expect, right? You create a button, get it on the screen there, and you can change your styles for your different states. If you open up the button states editor here, you're going to see right on the left-hand side, normal, over, down, disabled, visited, selected, just like you'd expect. But you can also do kind of two things there that make this really useful and extensible for other things, especially when you combine them with different features of Lectora, okay? One, you can selectively disable any of these built-in states. So for instance, if I don't want my button to have a hover state where my mouse is going to change when I hover over it, I can actually just turn that off. Turn off enable. Same thing with down, right? I can turn that one off as well. It's kind of odd. I'll explain why I'm going to do that in a second, but you can do that. It's very useful for a lot of purposes, and in my purpose, we're going to use it for some animation stuff, okay? I'll explain how in just 1 second again. But you can also add custom button states, okay? So right here, I've got custom 1. I just go up and I change, you know, from auto to custom. If I want it to be auto, it'll pick up what the normal was. If I go to custom, I can go in and make any edits that I need, right? Change my background color, add an image if I want. I can change a stroke and change my text, all that fun stuff. And I can do these, you know, however many I want. Aside from just styling your courses and making button development in Lectora a lot easier and a lot more streamlined, the kind of combination of these custom button states and the fact that you can turn off the standard button states means that you can use this feature in other ways too. Like I was saying in animation, right? So I've got an example of that. I'm going to show it to you, and I'm going to show you what I mean and how to do it in just a second. So I've got this screen here. Got a little timer shown on all the other slides here, but I've also got this plus icon beneath it. Well, that plus icon is it's a button, but I'm using it to create an animation because I'm taking advantage of the states that button has. When you hover over it, though, I've still got my hover state on it to indicate that it's button, so you guys can see it. But if I disable that and I hover over it, there won't be an indication of what's going on there, especially if I don't have actions tied to it, right? That becomes very useful when you want to streamline development for the certain types of interactions. In this case, all right, I've got that button and several button state changes tied to my timer. Basically, I'm saying count down, same kind of practice I showed you before. Start this, you know, change state action group instead of a move action group or whatever. And then at each second in that action group, I'll show you in a second, I'm just changing a state of my button. Okay. But imagine if instead of tied to a timer, I had my button states tied to, say, another button. And I was using my button states and the ability to change states and images inside of a button instead of using groups or layers inside of Lectora. So you could get into a position, for instance, where you've got, say, an expert who's giving their opinion in an interaction. You click button 1, you want to see what they say, they change position. They say they change position. Instead of using several images overlaid on top of each other for that interaction, you could just as conceivably use a custom button and remove the clickability of that button, and then target that button and swap image states with whatever else is going on in your action, and then kind of prevent yourself from having a bunch of excess actions, hide, show, that kind of stuff, and B, a bunch of extra objects on the base layer. In this particular case, we're just showing it loop, right? But again, you could extend that in a bunch of different ways. The build on it, almost identical to what I've shown before, right? A bunch of different ways to use the same types of things, kind of more broadly. I've got a change actions action group that I'm showing here, and every 1 second, right, delay initially at 0, I'm just setting the state of my animation button to different states. At 0, it goes to no. At 1 second delay, it goes to 1. At 2 second delay, it goes to 2, and so on until I've moved all the way around in my circle. I've got 10 different states, so 10 different views. Hopefully, you can see kind of where this stuff kind of can go. The point of it is to show, how to use really simple things to do either more complicated actions, or to use those really simple built-in things in an unexpected fashion. Especially when it comes to display and visualization and Lectora, you can get really, really crafty. You just kind of have to know some tricks to make some neat things happen. Okay, so that being said, speaking of crafty and some neat things happening, I'm going to go ahead finally and toss it over to Alan, and he's going to talk to you about progress indicators and some neat things that we're doing over there and that the tool can do for you. Okay, so I'm going to stop showing my screen, and Alan, take it away.
Thanks, Bill.
Man.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're not done with timers yet. There's another hidden feature with timers that I'm gonna showcase you in a minute. So let's talk about progress bars. Progress bars are one of the most overlooked items in Lectora that I, wasn't aware of at the beginning because I didn't know how Lectora works, back when I started. But then I noticed that they exist and they're pretty easy to customize and create. I mean, they're easy to set up, they're easy to customize, and they're basically ready to go. So we're gonna start with this. So this is let's start with a custom progress bar. You just have to insert them from here, from the insert tab, and click on progress bar. So you try to create it at the top level because they will iterate down, so it will stay always on top of everything if you need it. So if you go to properties, you will be able to modify its color, modify its steps, like how many steps you wanted to go forward or backwards. And in this case, I will just change the default image because we can customize it with other colors but for this showcase, let me try to change it from our own Lectora resources. And this comes from a stock library, status indicators, and just change it to this orange color or yellow color. See, the image changes, but you can also decide not to use the images from Lectora. You can add your own colors or create your PNGs outside of Lectora for this purpose. Okay, so you can modify the range, the number of steps, or how many tick marks, which are basically the numbers of the steps. And this custom type of progress bar, it's better, to use when you are creating your own branch content, right? Your own branch course. That means if there is a specific page that you don't want it to count or to take into account, you can just remove that page from the branching of your progress bar. Okay, let's putting this into easier words. Let's use our navigation buttons in here and add an extra action. And this action is basically on click, step progress bar position, right? So this the direction is forward, but we can also put one action in here that says step progress bar position to backwards. This you will be able to measure your progress forward and backward. And let me show you by previewing this course. Since the action is attached to the button, this is how will you measure your progress. Okay, and we go like forever. But what about courses that are already done? What about if you already created a big course? So there is a huge course that you have, and you wanted to implement the progress bars. There's an easier way to do this. And let's start. Let's do it with this branching course with chapters. The great thing about this specific example is that it's already branched out for you. You don't have to. This comes from our frameworks in Lectora 29. And let me insert our progress bar here real quick. And just let's change the color real quick. No image. Let's change the field. Hope this looks great. You can customize it with your own color. This is the main point in here. And we're going to change the custom type to table of content, which basically takes all of your information from your project explorer and puts them, and measure it from in your progress bar. And you don't have to add extra actions or anything. This is already done for you. Easy peasy. Let's run it. And I really love this feature, guys. And since this specific, course is branched out already, it will respect that configuration. So if you have already this kind of programming into your course, it will respect it. So you will see how this, changes from forward to backward. And I didn't do anything else. Just insert this progress bar. See, when you go back to your menu, it also goes backwards. So this is one of the overlooked features in Lectora that I really like, and I'm really excited to show you this feature. But also, there's another type of progress bars or indicator, which is the time ones. The time ones. This comes from a timer, just as Bill was showing you before when he was, showing you this with an assessment. You can also have a progress bar into assessment. This is great for gamification. This is great for branching out content. If you wanted to, use as a progress bar to show your progress and then goes to a failure page or a success page, you can do this. The same process by inserting a progress indicator or progress bar and change the properties to timer, right? You can change the number of seconds in here, but you can also attach an action to it simply by clicking action. And I already have the action in here, but it is on done playing, go to, failed page. And I put my progress bar on top of my project explorer, but I also hid it, from the other pages. There's another way you can do this, but let's keep it simple here. You can initially be hidden. You can initially have it on top, and then when you go into your first question, you can add an action to the page that will show. It will show your progress bar. So let me show you real quick here. When you click around, this is our test intro. There's no progress bar until you click your next page, and you can see it's going forward. But if time runs out, it goes straight to the result page or failure page, whatever you have, set up this for. And there's a lot of things you can do with progress bars. There is no complex ways to design a progress bar because it's basically a progress bar, but there's also a lot of extra features you can use with Lectora and create beautiful content in a way. For example, we have created the UI kits, and with these new UI kits, we have included also new progress indicator that matches our own style packs and themes. So I hope that you get all of these and you're as excited as I am to use them in your courses. Thanks, guys.
Hey, one quick question. So you mentioned gamification with those progress indicators, right? So you can set those to specific points, correct? Is that so? Because we can track variables and we can kind of really control just about anything in Lectora, right? These could be really useful for something like a game, right? So if you got like a health meter or a timer, like you mentioned, as a nice visual way to represent a timer in a game, these could be really particularly useful without necessarily seeming immediately obviously connected, right?
Because the fact that you are able to add extra actions to the progress bar, which are not clickable objects, but you can use or you can attach variables to it, to the progress bar. There is, the limitation that I can't imagine what you will be able guys to do.
There's a lot of that with Lectora, right? Like that's kind of the great part about Lectora. There's a bunch of different ways and low limitation, right? Okay, so I still got a bunch of things we can go over. There's kind of start getting increasingly more complex, but I wanted to stop and see if we had any input from the crowd. If
So we do have a few questions that I thought we could tackle before we move on to new topics. So first, for Alan, with the progress bar, does it reset if the learner exits the course, or will it remember their place for when they come back?
Yeah, you can. Let me show you my screen again. And can you see my Lectora screen now?
Yes.
Can you? Okay, cool. If you click your progress bar and okay, this is a TOC, but if you made it custom, you can retain the value of it. So yeah, it will keep your progress at a specific point in time, or the progress. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And then, Bill, we had a attendee who wanted to know if you could show in a little bit more detail how to create layers with the button states. I think that was when you were showing the animation of the line.
Yeah, so layers is, we don't have layers in Lectora, right? This is kind of a different way to think about layers almost, right? Kind of approximating layers. What we do have is groups, okay? And I'll pop in the tool real quick here. But basically, let me show my screen. So if you're building a standard interaction in Lectora, right, the way that you're gonna build it, assuming you want to hit a button and then pop content, is you've got a series of content groups, okay, text, images grouped together. And you press a button, we're just going to show that group or hide that group. Okay, but let's imagine instead that we're maybe in addition to that, or maybe instead of that. Yeah, we'll go instead. There's about a million different ways you could build this out. So I'm kind of thinking on the fly here. But let's, instead of using groups, we're going to use a change state action on a button to change an image into different images, and then we're going to use a swap contents action on text. Okay, we'll set that up like right now. Okay, it's super simple to do. I've got my button here. We're just going to use this plus sign button because it's already set up for this kind of thing. All I did again was I created an image, or an ellipse shape, just a shape on the screen, an ellipse shaped button on the screen, and then I gave it an image fill. Okay, then I'm going to go into my styles pane here, and I'm going to give it a bunch of different states. Actually, what we'll do too is we'll just give these all a black background so that it's really clear and easy to see. Okay, so basically I've just got a button with a bunch of different states in it, and I want to target those states. I think 5 is probably plenty. Okay. I'm going to go grab some buttons from the other example that I had here, these 3 buttons. Okay, just to save time. And I'm going to paste those on my screen. Okay. Actually, you know what? We're gonna do one, and then we'll copy and paste that one once we get it set up. Okay. So for my first action, I'm just going to overwrite this, and I'm going to say text, or do I want to do set state? Let's do set state, and that would be set state of button 1, and I want to change it to normal. Is that the right one? Let's change the name. Hold on one second. And I want to change that. In this case, I want to set it to be, oops. Sorry, guys, I keep grabbing the wrong object. Here we go. In this case, I want it to be T1. All right. And then I'm also going to change contents of my title object. And I want to say you selected button 1. Okay. I'm going to copy and paste this guy over here. And I'm going to set this first action from T1. I'm going to set it to T3. And I'm going to change this content to be you selected button 2. And again, I don't need any more additional objects because I'm just going to change the content in this title object. But this could be showing other objects. This could be doing any other thing for these actions. Right? And then I'm going to copy and paste again for a third time. Set the state to be T5. And my content to be button 3. Now, assuming I didn't do anything wrong, which is totally possible, when I click, oh, I've still got my timer. That's what I did now. All right, let me change actions and just delete that. Now, when I preview my object, should be on normal. When I click button 1, we should see it rotate and my text change. 2, rotate back, text change. 3, right? So we can see how this kind of works, right? Now what that does is that allows me to have, and this is, I don't know that I would necessarily do this as like a full, this is my workflow, more of kind of an interesting way to think about what we have there in the tool in a different way. But what this would do, and this is something I've been just starting to play with, right, is instead of 3 or 4 different images in my Project Explorer that I hide and show, I can now keep it in one object, target that single object, and set its state however I need, right? And then everything's contained. I got less that I got to deal with. I got fewer actions that I could deal with, 1 action instead of 2 or 3. So that's how you do it, right? Real simple execution, be like that.
Awesome, thank you. I think that answers that question. If not, feel free to submit another question and tell us we didn't answer it. We do have a handful of questions about timers. So, is it possible to set the time so it will not start over if a person exits an exam? Can it be locked in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't see why not, right? Like, so you can turn off a timer from autoplay. So that's to begin with. So what you could do, again, it's Lectora, so there's probably a bunch of ways to do it. You can go into your timer here, and under properties, you could just uncheck this auto start option, and instead put an action somewhere on your page or something like that that says, start timer. Let's see what we got. We got on show, and my action should be play. Yeah, timer, right? You can choose which timer it is, and then I would just add a conditional. That if they've visited and come back, or track some sort of a variable. If you've got some sort of a like a completion status thing you could pick up, or even something custom, I would just put that on the on started on page show start timer action, and that way when they come in, if it's retained that value, then it doesn't start. You don't use that timer. So that's one way to do it.
And then kind of similar question, how do you create a timer that forces a person to stay on the screen for a period of time, so that they can't go to the next slide until the timer runs out? For example, if you want them to be reading a file, you want them to force them to stay there until you've read the whole thing.
So with a timer, I just saw my knee pop into the window there. I was trying to avoid that. So with that particular request, there's again probably a couple ways you do it. I might do a page events action on that, which is slightly different. Okay, and that is that we've got this kind of we've got this page events pane in the bottom section of Lectora 21, where I think I've got it super minimized. Yeah, I've got my workspace all messed up. Where basically you can come in at a certain point and say, okay, at 23 minutes and 10 seconds in, or whatever you want, whatever you're going to set it at, throw an action to show your navigation, maybe something like that. Or yeah, you could tie it to a timer. Really, I would go in and say, like, I've got navigation hidden on this page, for instance. Okay. Initially hidden, because that's how I've got my navigation set up. I could go in and at the end of this timer, I could add an action and say, on done playing, show. I don't have my navigation grouped, so it would be a couple things, but show the next button, right? And that would look, I think that should work. Something like this at the end of 10 seconds, which is not auto starting because we turned that off.
Yeah, you can also have a disabled next button, and then after the time run out, it can show the next button, or even if you have hidden or disabled, change. Yeah.
Yeah, which is actually that's great, because that's tying back to what we were just showing, right? Like we've got an action set that instead of showing the next button, which is what I'm doing here, you could have it initially set to disabled, right? And then after that's 10-second action, it should set that to enabled, and you can see here the next button's popped up, right? So instead it would just be from grayed out to visible and actionable. That's a great suggestion on that one, Ellen.
Okay, last question. It's a follow-up to the question about setting the timer so it doesn't start over. They want to be able, so the person is exiting the course in order to get more time to answer the questions, I think. So they're exiting the course, they're closing the browser and then reopening it. So they're basically starting the timer over to get more time to answer the questions, I think. Is there a way to get around them being able to do that?
Yeah, so I would almost want to kind of table that for a bigger discussion.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe something to post in the Rockstars community and see how other people are handling that.
I think so. I think you'll get a lot. There's a potential for a number of different opinions on that, and there's probably a decent conversation to be had around it. So I would post it there and see if we get any responses, and if not immediately, then we can try to address that. So that's a good question. It's probably something that a lot of users are dealing with, something like that. So maybe we could do a blog post in the future or something for it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I will let you get to the rest of your tips now.
Okay. All right. So we're at 147, right? I was gonna figure out. I was kind of keeping this informal. I've got a couple things I want to show, or at least I thought about showing. One of those is just prompts, or not prompts. I'm sorry, pop-ups. I was going to go back into tests and talk about some page behavior stuff. I also was just going to show, I've got some kind of CSS-y stuff that we can do here. But I don't know that we can even necessarily get through all of really one of them in 10 minutes and still have time. So I'm just going to barrel through real quick and show you the basic idea. And a lot of these, I think we'll probably circle back and do something on the blog post out of a couple of these, because these are all good points, but maybe not worth going and doing a full webinar over in the future. So we'll see. All right, so because we have a lot of brand new users from Lectora, I'm gonna, instead of going straight into pop-ups, I'm actually gonna hit two kind of basic-ish points that longtime users will understand, but might be very new to new Lectora developers. Okay, so one, actually we're gonna do three instead of two. So one, there's this concept of inheritance in Lectora. This is purely for brand new Lectora users, okay? This doesn't exist in most other tools, but if you think about it and you think about web development, it makes a ton of sense, all right? It's real simple, though sometimes it gets confused. Anything that exists above the first page in a course, right? So above my intro, for instance, on this one, is considered global, which means that it applies to every single thing underneath that course, or underneath that first page, and including the first page. All right. So in this example, unless I say otherwise, every single page is going to get this additional fonts thing, the pop-up styling, cancel, next, and back. Now that's great for setting up things like themes or templates that carry over for everything, right? That's actually how our themes work. They get dumped up at the global level, and you can choose to turn them on or off at different points in your course. Okay, so on timers, for instance, I may decide that I want to change the inheritance there on this particular page. And instead of having every single thing on the page, I only want my additional fonts and my pop-up styling to be shown, but I don't want my navigation to be even available on that page. So no calls, can't call an action to it, can't do anything. It just doesn't exist for this page. All right. Very simple and easy process conceptually, but it is different than in a lot of other tools. Think of this almost like a slide master for anybody who's used to PowerPoint for development or Storyline or something like that, right? Anything that sits up at that top level is going to persist and basically be your master slide elements, okay? You'll notice the two that I have up at the very top, this is where I was going to go, are additional fonts and pop-up styling, and they look a little different than some of these other objects. Okay, so this is something unique to Lectora, or not unique to Lectora, but as compared to other desktop authoring tools, this is unique. Okay, so a lot of web authoring tools may have this, but most desktop authoring tools don't do this in the same way. And that is that one, remember I made reference to web authoring. Lectora takes advantage of takes advantage of the output, takes advantage of kind of the development nature to a certain extent of web authoring or of e-learning development, and it allows you to include certain things easily that are sometimes challenging. So additional fonts, for instance, is an HTML. It's meta tags, just like you would have on a web page. Okay. What it does for us here is that it allows us to include custom fonts that live out on the internet without having to include them prepackaged, right? It's your call for your custom fonts. If I crack this open, what you'll see is that I've got this little link href tag in there that just comes from Google. You go to Google, you say, I want to use this font, right? In this particular case, it's Oswald. It gives you this tag, you dump it in there, and now everything that you have tagged with Oswald on your development file is going to show up that way on the end user's machine, even if they don't have that font installed. This is a big question for a lot of new Lectora users. It has been confused for a very long time, and it's very, very, very simple. It takes really three things. One, you need an HTML object. You go over to Insert, hit HTML extension. There you go, that's step one. Two, type goes to meta tags. That's it, step two. And then step three, additional fonts. This is the tricky one. Name it additional fonts, make sure it's the topmost object on your title explorer, and then paste whatever link content for your fonts that you have in there. This works with Typekit. This works with Google Fonts. If you have a company that has a hosted URL for a font or something you can pick up from there, that'll work for here too. Easy to do, not commonly described, or not, I guess, often described and explained real simply, and a lot of other tools don't offer that. So there's that. Right below it, you'll see pop-up styling. Okay, so what's going on there, all right, is Lectora allows you natively to include, reference, and use both CSS and JavaScript. That combined, right, for any advanced developers out there, makes this tool just infinitely extensible. Okay, so real fast, just an example case of this. I shouldn't be showing it now. I was going to show it at the end of the thing, but it's relevant. If you know how to do even really simple stuff with CSS and jQuery or JavaScript, you can get some things in Lectora that you really would not imagine are doable in the box, right, with very minimal effort. Googling things amount of effort, like it really doesn't take all that much. So for example, this that I've got here, right, I've got this animation going on in the background. It looks a little jagged because of my connection here. But these are Lectora objects that are being rotated by CSS and animated around my sun that I've got here, incidentally at the appropriate orbital speed, because you can do that. And then everything else around it is built just in Lectora, right? I've got a menu with some of the things we showed today, different images that have been converted to buttons. They have different button states, etc. And because all of these are images that can have actions tied to them, right? They're all clickable objects inside of Lectora. Again, doable with just a tiny little bit of CSS. In that particular case, we're just assigning a class because we know what we can target. We know what objects we can target because we can do some CSS stuff in the tool. All right, that's a little more advanced, but even from a very rudimentary fashion, you can just include CSS objects or CSS to style objects inside of your course as well. And you can do it a couple different ways, right? So again, in this example that I just showed a second ago, I've just, with my space exploration there, I've just got a CSS, a cascading style sheet. And inside of that, I've just got some CSS for my animations. But I can also choose to run that as meta tags again and run it a little differently if I wanted to and still get the same type of results, right? So over here, I've got it done that way. And inside of which is just meta tags declaring styles. I mean, it's the same, but it's two ways to kind of do the same thing, right? And what I've got going on in here is I've actually got some classes that we use for our pop-ups in Lectora. and I'm styling them so that they look differently than they otherwise would. I don't even have to do anything in the tool to get them to do that. So for example, if I run this pop-ups are cool page, you'll see that the pop-up that results when I click over it has some CSS to it. Oh, not in preview mode, the wrong one. Sorry about that. Let me open this up again. Sorry, guys. But yeah, so if I open up this pop-ups are cool and I click this guy, you'll see I've got some padding that I've added to the top of this pop-up page. I've got some padding that I added to the bottom. I've changed the background color with CSS, and I also added this kind of nice little, border up at the top up there, and that is gonna, it's gonna adapt to my window size here because it's done with CSS. It's not done with objects. It's not done with settings or anything like that. So those are kind of two really, really powerful features in here that don't get a lot of attention or a lot of love in Lectora, but even as a very beginning developer, you can make use of to do some really, really neat stuff. But as an advanced developer, you can really, really take advantage of that to do some absolutely crazy things in there. Okay, so we're already at 157. I think we'll have to table the other two things that I had here for either an article or another time. Maybe let's see if we have any other questions, and if not, I'll turn it back over to you, Stephanie.
We do have one quick question.
Yeah.
So when you use that HTML extension to get the custom fonts link, will that font then show up in Lectora's font dropdown menu?
Okay, so in Lectora Online, that's all you got to do. Is if you put in the meta tag there, you name it additional fonts, and you save and refresh your course, boom, that Google font or whatever you're using shows up in the drop down, you choose it, you do whatever you need. In desktop, because it's a different technology, right? You need to install that font locally. Link, say, okay, this is, now choose it from your drop down. I'm going to choose Oswald in this particular case, and then go ahead and add in that meta tag. And then that kind of creates that linkage, and then make sure that it displays properly on the user's end machine as well.
Okay, great. And then one final question. Do you have any recommendations of resources for learning more about advanced Lectora development? Any secret sources, favorite presenters?
Love to hear that question. So right now, I mean, there's still a fair bit out there on the community, and if you dig, you can find some interesting topics. Right now, it's really, I think you probably have to search for specific stuff, most likely to find what you're looking for, right? But it's an interesting question, and it makes me happy to hear it, because this is one of the reasons why I ask the same questions at the top of every Lectora Live. How advanced are you as a developer, and how experienced are you with Lectora? Is just I'm curious about how far our users are progressing and how much there's a need for some more of this advanced stuff, because I think that Lectora really, really shines at making things, endlessly possible, right? But Lectora also has the ability to extend, to kind of grow along with you, right? And to help you as you develop, but we need resources for that. So if there's demand for it, maybe we actually, I've been thinking about kind of setting aside some more advanced scripting topics, right? Joe and I are kicking around some actual scripting topics. Then there's also some just more complicated build methods that we might want to share out there as well. So if there is demand for that, currently beyond the community, I don't think I have a ton of it. Let us know and give us suggestions as to what you'd like to see. And that's stuff that, we believe we read the suggestions and we use them, and we'll figure out a way to kind of build on that request if there's demand for it, definitely.
Awesome, thank you. All right, those are all of the questions. We're just getting a lot of questions about resources for getting started. So as Bill said, the Rockstars community, and the link to that is in the chat. And then we also have, for very new Lectora developers, we have our knowledge base articles, Those go through the basics like inheritance and variables, and those are a really great primer for people just starting out with Lectora. And also these Lectora Lives. We do these every month, and absolutely submit, topic ideas. We want to know what you guys want to learn. These are for Lectora users, for people interested in Lectora. So absolutely tell us what you want to learn about, and we will tailor the Lectora Lives to that. Now, for those of you who don't have Lectora yet, you can get a 30-day free trial on our website, and the link to that is also in our chat as well. We really appreciate you all joining us today, and Bill, Alan, thank you so much for sharing these tips. I think you inspired a lot of people to try out some new things in Lectora and play around. So thank you guys so much, and we will see everyone at our next webinar. Have a great day.